Georgia continues to be the center of the nation's political universe, and we here at Atlanta News First are continuing to be our commitment to bring you the latest political news, headlines, and analysis. I'm Tim Darnell. Welcome to this edition of Political Update on the Atlanta News First digital streaming apps here at our desk in Midtown Atlanta. We're joined this morning and this afternoon by our great political reporter, Doug Reardon, talking about some of the most recent political headlines that we've experienced recently over the last couple of days. Doug, really one of the first items that's on our list is what happened yesterday when a motion was filed in Fulton County Superior Court by District Attorney Fonnie Willis to actually disqualify an attorney who had been representing 10 Republican electors who were prepared to allegedly cast fake electoral ballots for Donald Trump in November 2020 in the aftermath of the presidential election.
Right, and that case is, as you said, what's keeping Georgia at the center of the political universe. That attorney that you're talking about is Kimberly Dubrow, and as you mentioned, she's representing just under a dozen of those fake electors who tried to give Donald Trump the state's electoral votes back in 2020. Of course, we know that failed to work, but the issue here that Willis says in this new filing is that Dubrow failed to present offers of immunity to her clients last year, all 10 of those fake electors. Some of them, of course, we know are Georgia lawmakers and officials. And Dubrow said in response that the accusations were entirely false and that she indeed offered her clients immunity, but none were interested. Now, we don't know, of course, what the truth is here. This is a little back and forth, but we do know that Dubrow is being paid by the state Republican Party to defend these state electors. And this also indicates, I think, to at least to you and me and to a lot of people who had their finger on the pulse of this, that there are still immunity offers floating out there, which is kind of new information to us. So we will have to wait and see what happens with Dubrow either staying on or being removed from this case. But I think the big thing to come out of this is that there could be still some efforts to try and get these electors to say whatever they may know about these other electors, or possibly even President Donald Trump himself, former President Trump, before any charges start to come down against anybody in this case.
And while the 2020 presidential election here in Georgia remains a hot topic, we did have two very important municipal elections on Tuesday in two vastly different parts of metro Atlanta. Talk to us a little bit about what happened in Clayton County.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it's always election season in Georgia, and it certainly was election week in the Clayton and Cobb County areas. So let's start with the Clayton County Sheriff's Office, because that the genesis of that was quite controversial. So Levon Allen won by a margin of less than 300 votes. He beat out Clarence Cox with 50.88%. Allen was serving already as the interim there in Clayton County, and he will now serve the remainder officially of Victor Hill's term. And Hill, of course, here's the controversy, is serving 18 months in federal prison on civil rights violations of a detainee. And so now his term went through December 2024, and that is what Sheriff Allen will serve before he has to run again. We do know that early voting was held April 10th to the 14th. Just about 8,000 voters cast ballots there. Turnout for the runoff, 15,000 ballots. So a little bit of a reverse from trends where we typically see runoff elections get less attention. This certainly was not the case. I think people wanted to pick their sheriff by hand here, and they had the opportunity to do so. And then, of course, way back in March on the 21st, we held a special election for the mayor and the city council seats in Mableton, and that was a big deal. Of course, Mableton voted last year on cityhood. They were one of four referendums in Cobb County alone, and they were the only one that actually approved cityhood out of those four. And so today, people there are waking up to a new mayor, a new city council, and this is significant for a number of reasons. One, because there's still a lot of back and forth in that area of Mableton as to who actually wants to be part of the city and who does not. Some people in the northern part of what is now the new city of Mableton just don't want to be there, and they had made an effort to try and petition the state legislature to de-annex their houses and their areas from the city of Mableton so they could stay with Cobb County and continue receiving the services that the county provides. That was not successful, but 2 of the council members who were seated and elected last night are actually in favor of the annexation. So now there could be an avenue to do this at the local level. But the reason this is significant is because these are now the people who will be running this new city, the very first elected officials, and they have, honestly, they have quite a tall order, because now they're splitting from Cobb County. So you have to now set a city budget, you have to elect a city manager, or pick a city manager, I should say, and you have to decide what services you're going to want to pay for. We're talking about trash removal and water and sewage, all things that they relied on the county for before, but you're not in the county anymore. And so again, this for the new mayor and this new city council that were seated last night certainly have a lot to do in their first couple of weeks here.
This new city of Mableton is not doesn't fall under county services anymore. One issue that continues to resonate within the city of Atlanta is the controversial proposed Atlanta Public Safety Training Center, and we understand there is a hearing that is, or a meeting of some sort, that's happening today.
Yes, that is, of course, with the public safety training facility. People who are opposed to it call it Cop City. What they did, well, a couple weeks ago, they came out with a list of names, 40 names of educators and local officials, environmentalists, and even some politicians and civil rights leaders who are going to serve on that task force made up of 40 people. They have their very first meeting today, and as we understand it, that's going on right now, but we don't know much else about it because it is not open to the public and they are not streaming that event. We do know that the mayor is going to be holding a press conference at 4:30 on today's meeting of that task force. But again, this is a huge flashpoint issue. And so we were maybe a little bit surprised here at Atlanta News First to find out that given that transparency has been a big thing for some of those opposed to this development project, that this was not open to the public and they were doing all of this behind closed doors.
We're talking and continuing to cover some of the most topical political headlines here in Atlanta. And this coming Saturday, April 22nd, is Earth Day, which the first Earth Day was held back in 1970 and now has grown in popularity and awareness to include more than 1 billion people around the globe in more than 190 countries. One of the most highest visible, committed environmental leaders here in Metro Atlanta is DeKalb Commissioner Ted Terry from District 6. Not only is formerly the mayor of Clarkston, but also former head of the Sierra Club of Georgia. And Commissioner, you have launched an initiative called the DeKalb Green New Deal that includes several platforms. Tell us a little bit about this.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Tim. We are trying to address the dual crisis of climate change as well as economic inequality. And the DeKalb Green New Deal, which we launched on Monday this week in celebration of Earth Week and Earth Day coming up on Saturday, is to take this people-powered movement of residents all across DeKalb County who care about not just our planet, but also our local neighborhoods and parks and riversheds and watersheds, because we have to really focus on the global picture, but we have to act locally right here in DeKalb County and Metro Atlanta.
Now, part of the platform advocates developing sustainable and affordable housing opportunities for under-resourced communities. When did the issue of environmental awareness and activism become a political issue that's really tied to the concept of social justice? How did this all happen, and when did it start happening?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tim. I think really the founding of Earth Day, I think, was the beginning of that recognition that the decisions we make, whether how we develop our communities, the cars we drive, how we produce our own electricity, how we dispose of our waste, it doesn't just impact the planet, but at the end of the day, it actually has to go somewhere or have the detrimental impacts of affecting people. And so when we talk about the DeKalb Green New Deal, when we talk about environmental justice, we understand that there are communities right here in Metro Atlanta, right here in DeKalb County, that have been facing environmental injustice and environmental racism for decades and decades and decades. And they have borne the impact of the worst aspects of climate change, whether it's flooding in our neighborhoods, severe storms, and then most recently what we're finding even more interesting is the combination of public health health and environmental health. You know, we also have a healthcare crisis. We have a hospital that recently closed. We're seeing higher emergency room visits, and we're actually finding from studies around the country that hospitals, when they see increases of emergency room visits from things like asthma, the cost of that is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to treat those emergencies, but addressing energy efficiency, weatherization, and even indoor air pollution in homes and apartments that have been built years and years ago with mold and contaminants, all of those investments actually saves us money in the long run. And so this is an issue of environmental justice, energy equity, as well as sustainability.
You were mayor of Clarkston from 2014 to 2020. Clarkston has been described as the most diverse square mile in the nation. It's been called or referred to as the Ellis Island of the South. What kind of unique challenges do these communities face in terms of environment, in terms of climate, in terms of healthcare?
Absolutely, that's a great question. And so first off, we have invested over $500,000 of American Rescue Plan money over the last 2 years in creating green job opportunities in the Clarkston area, central DeKalb, to train our local residents in the HVAC and energy efficiency weatherization job category. And then we've actually put that training to use in retrofitted and weatherized dozens and dozens of homes in the Clarkston area, in areas that have low incomes, where we've been able to save 33% on their power bills, upwards of $600 a year in energy savings, as well as addressing indoor air quality, which I mentioned earlier was so important. And then finally, you mentioned Clarkston being a community of refugees. For many, many decades, refugees have come to America, to Georgia, and mostly to Clarkston, DeKalb County, who have been fleeing violence and war and genocide. The most recently, we've seen Afghani and Ukrainian residents coming to our community, and we welcome them with open arms. But now we're seeing another category of refugee emerge, and that's the climate refugee. The UN report on climate says that over the next 30 years, another 100 million people could be displaced from their homes, their communities, their nations. And this is on top of the existing 100 million people that are in refugee status around the world right now. So the disruption that climate is causing, not just in our own backyard, but around the world, is causing instability that is further affecting human life and is going to strain countries around the world, including ourselves.
Part of the platform, again, going back to the DeKalb Green New Deal that was launched this week in conjunction with Earth Week and Earth Day this Saturday, is calling for the preservation of 2,000 acres of the South River Forest, which, as we've been covering extensively, is part of the proposed Atlanta Public Safety Training Center. What is your objection to using this land for the development of that complex?
Well, the bottom line is the city of Atlanta, as well as DeKalb County residents, have for many, many years sought to protect what is over 2,000 acres of what really is the last major urban forest in the country. This is the lungs of South Atlanta, South Metro Atlanta. The existential crisis that is climate change is something that is before us right now, and we have to change the way that we look at old systems. And what we're finding now is that once these acres of forest are cut down, they're gone forever. They're developed. Less than 2% of DeKalb County is left undeveloped. This is a real warning sign for all of us. And I think what we're seeing in the protest movement and the thousands of emails and comments that we've seen over the last 2 years is that people want to preserve what is left, because once it is cut, once it is gone, it is gone forever. And so this is our moment. This is an inflection point in our society for Metro Atlanta. We have a long history of being the city in the forest. And it's not just about planting trees and downtowns and streetscapes. The real impact that we can make on addressing climate change is preserving thousands of acres of forest. They're huge carbon sinks. They're good for the ecology, the wildlife. They're also good economic development tools because people want to see trails. They want to see green space. They want to protect the wildlife. These are things that are a win-win for all of our communities.
Does any of your opposition or any opposition that you've seen from other individuals who oppose this development have anything to do with the political or social consequences of a massive public safety training center for our law enforcement? Don't our police and our law enforcement deserve the highest quality training facility that we can provide?
Absolutely, and in fact, actually, I'm the chair of the Public Safety Committee here in DeKalb County, and we are also talking about our police academy and our police and fire training systems because they are outdated and need to be updated. We're planning to go through a public input process, and the number one argument that we've made all along is that this training site was decided for us. No one asked the residents of DeKalb, the elected leaders, whether this was something that we would welcome. At the end of the day, we believe that the Clean Water Act stipulates that no further major development can be done on Entrenchment Creek. It's already a state-impaired river system. The South River has been consistently named as one of the most endangered river systems in the entire country. And the pollution level limits are already 10 times over the current allowed capacity. And so our argument at the core of this is that the Clean Water Act says that no further pollution can go into this watershed. And that is our argument, and we believe that the training site should go somewhere else, and that the original idea of what the people of Atlanta, the people who live in DeKalb County had expected for many years, and that was the promise of the South River Forest, 2,000 acres that would be preserved for the people of Atlanta, for our children, for our grandchildren, for the next 100 years.
And talking about the environment and the South River Forest, would you be opposed to any public safety training center either in DeKalb or in the city of Atlanta that resides within DeKalb borders if it was not located on this particular site?
I actually believe there's a lot of other sites, whether in Atlanta or even in DeKalb County, that would be much better. We are talking about a major development site that would create a lot of what we call impervious surface. And if you've been around some areas of DeKalb County, industrial areas, you'll see huge parking lots, huge industrial areas that are already paved over. They're already have been developed, and so they need to be redeveloped. And so I think the core of really of what's at issue here is that you got to have the meeting before the meeting about the meeting. And when deciding to make a major investment, whether it's a training site or a housing development or a new convention center or all the things that public dollars would go to, you have to be really transparent. We have to have accountability in how those plans and policies are put in place. And you have to ask the people who are paying for it what they want to see, especially those who have been impacted the most. And as I pointed out earlier, this area of DeKalb County has suffered from environmental racism for too long. They have been subject to industrial spills, truck parking lots, air pollution, gunfire range for many, many decades, and of course the pollution going into their own river in their own backyards. And so at some point we have to say enough is enough. We have already gone way past what the law allows. We have to stop development, we have to reassess, and we have to protect what is remaining.
And we're going to be continuing to cover the controversial proposed Atlanta Public Safety Training Center here on Atlanta News First. Thanks to Commissioner Ted Terry from District 6 in DeKalb County talking about Earth Day coming up and the newly launched DeKalb Green New Deal. Thanks to all of you for watching this edition of Political Update on Atlanta News First.